Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about fusion. We'll start with where our energy system is today, how fusion works, and why fusion is just so exciting. To put it simply, fusion creates clean, safe, reliable energy. This is important because energy is our economy. If it's climate change, the military, technology, or healthcare, energy is the foundation of everything we do. Let's start with how much energy we actually use. Since the Industrial Revolution in the 1900s, we've been building the energy infrastructure that powers our world today. In the next 25 years, we're going to need to double it. A big driver of this comes from a growing population. Billions of these people over the next decade will move out of poverty and into the middle class. On the technology front, the rise of AI and data centers is going to drive a massive need for clean, reliable power. We're also continuing to electrify and automate industry. This hockey stick trend up and to the right means that we're going to need to build a ton to get there. The question in front of us is, how are we going to do it? We have great solutions to get us there, but each has its drawback. Solar and wind, for example, are great, but they need the sun to shine or the wind to blow. Hydro and geothermal work great, but only in a few areas where the conditions are just right. Both of these are even more location-specific than wind and solar. Nuclear fission has been the workhorse of the energy industry for decades because it almost has everything we need. Unfortunately, risks due to meltdown and radioactive waste limit its wide-scale adoption. And of course, we have fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have gotten us to where we are today, but unfortunately they produce those pesky little emissions that we're trying so hard to avoid. Plus, there's only enough fuel on the planet for the next 50 to 100 years anyway, so ultimately, we need something else. We need something new. Something that can operate all day, every day, be clean, and totally and completely safe. This is fusion. Fusion is also not some distant dream of science fiction either. We know fusion works because it's quite literally the source of energy that powers our sun and stars. Creating fusion on Earth is often referred to as the holy grail of clean energy, and rightfully so. It literally has it all. Is it safe? Yes, it's safe. It is physically impossible to have a meltdown event in a fusion machine. Plus, the only emissions are like helium and water anyways. Is it limitless? Well, more or less. We need two things for fusion to occur. We need the hydrogen, or H and H2O, and lithium, the same lithium you use in electric vehicles. I mean, this all sounds pretty amazing, right? What's the catch? Well, it turns out bottling up the sun, not an easy thing to do. Fusing atoms is tricky business. The analogy I like to use is popping popcorn. To make a nice bowl of delicious popcorn, you need to start with the right number of kernels. Too few kernels and, well, you're not going to have enough popcorn to get through the first 5 seconds of a movie, and what's the point of a movie without popcorn? Same for fusion. We need enough atoms or kernels in the pot to make sure we have enough energy for fusion to create electricity. We call this density. With enough kernels in the pot, you need to have the right temperature. Too low and none of your kernels are going to pop. This is again the same for fusion. Finally, once we have the right density of kernels in the pot and the right temperature, we need enough time to allow our popcorn to pop. Same for fusion. We've known for decades exactly what conditions we need to pop the popcorn when it comes to fusion. Or more specifically, what combination of density, temperature, and time we need for fusion to work. What we've been working on for so many years is finding the best way to get there. The most popular approach is magnetic confinement. These are machines that use super strong magnetic fields, quite literally like a force field in a sci-fi movie, to create the extreme conditions needed for fusion to occur. On the other end of the spectrum, we have inertial confinement. This is where machines compress atoms at extremely high temperatures really quickly. In the middle of these two is a hybrid category called magneto-inertial confinement. As you might guess from the clever name here, these are machines that take elements of magnetic and inertial confinement to create something unique. Regardless, though, of which technology we choose, the goal for fusion is singular. It's create more energy out than we put in. What makes fusion so exciting is exactly this. It's a self-perpetuating energy machine. Now, there's been this long-standing joke that fusion is 30 years away and always will be. I want to put this one to bed today because it most definitely is not, but look at this graph. There's a lot going on. Here's my translation. In the 1960s, we knew fusion could work, but we were nowhere close to making it happen. Since then, fusion progress has tracked to Moore's law, the growth rate that defined the explosion of the semiconductor industry. All of this work gave birth to the commercial fusion industry in the mid-2010s and to ignition finally in 2022. The first fusion machines are expected to come online in the mid-2030s. We are building and building fast. Commonwealth Fusion Systems is one of the leaders out there today. They're building a magnetic confinement machine called a tokamak, but in a much smaller, more compact form. Zap is another super exciting fusion company out there. They are continuing to push the boundaries of what's possible and are creating fusion every day in their facility just outside Seattle. This fusion core behind me could fit in the back of your car. Excimer is another promising fusion company out there who's leading the way in inertial confinement. But these are just 3 companies. There are founders and employees at over 70 companies around the world dedicating their lives' work to commercializing fusion because they too see that we're at an inflection point. This progress is what's getting us at Emerson and our investing peers really excited about fusion. For decades, fusion was the work of government contracts and R&D. No more. All the progress over the last 6 decades has shifted us into commercial gear, with investors funding over $7 billion of capital into fusion. In my world of venture capital, there are very few opportunities that fit the asymmetric upside potential that fusion offers. Yes, there are risks, but the prize on the other side is about as big as it gets. Now, what gets me really excited about fusion is this tiny white dot. For 200,000 years, we used fire or wood as our primary energy source. During this time, society's advancements over those years was relatively capped. It wasn't until the harnessing of fossil fuels around the Industrial Revolution that a notable jump in our advancement occurred. By producing just 3 times the amount of energy for every pound of wood, fossil fuels provided us the energy density to launch our modern world. What makes fusion so exciting is that it provides a 7 million times increase over fossil fuels. Just let that sink in for a minute. We built our modern world on a 3 times jump. Where is 7 million going to take us? There is a ton of global value that fusion delivers, but what about emissions? To reach net zero emissions by 2050, we have to have emissions fall off a freaking cliff. Let's be real, this is just not going to happen. Even in an accelerated deployment scenario from the International Energy Agency, where we really kick things up a gear, we might be able to achieve a 68% emissions reductions by 2050. If we continue down the path we're on, under projected policies and technological progression, we will only see an 18% reduction in global emissions. We are nowhere close to solving global emissions, and fusion is one of the few tools in our toolkit that can decarbonize giant chunks of global emissions, especially in the developing world in areas where renewables just aren't well suited. So, what do we need to make all of this happen? The biggest risk to fusion is no longer science. It's not even technology. The biggest risk that we face is capital availability. Commercial fusion is finally at a place where real progress can be made, but fusion funding is peanuts. And I mean, it is literally peanuts. In 2023, US peanut subsidies were larger than funding for US fusion programs. This is also roughly half of what China is spending on commercializing fusion. If we lose the fusion race to China, we will have ceded solar, electric vehicles, and now fusion to one of our largest economic rivals, and China will dominate the energy transition and one of the largest market opportunities in a generation. We need roughly $4 billion over the next 5 years to stand up a commercial fusion industry in the US and stay ahead in this race. This is only roughly 1/5 of NASA's annual budget and only about 1% of global annual venture capital. When you boil it down, the money that we need for fusion pales in comparison to the value that fusion can deliver. So, if you can remember just 3 things from today, remember this. Energy demand is growing, and we need every tool in our toolkit to meet that demand sustainably. Fusion is a lot closer than you think. Go check out the data and see how close we really are. Funding is the biggest risk fusion faces. Commercialization is coming. It's up to us, though, how fast we want it to get there. Thank you.